morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is the High Dragon's Breath Bow Wow, welcoming you back to the Chaos series. Today we are talking about the Chaos God Tzeentch. After our video on Nurgle a couple of days ago, we are moving on to Tzeentch, the god himself. So let's get right into it. Theorized origin. Now again, according to my revised origin of the Chaos Gods, the original nothingness of the universe, which would have spawned Nurgle into existence, immediately upon the first act of creation, whatever that may have been, would immediately have spawned another entity, where one is the representation of entropy and ennui, the other one is creation, Genesis, in fact, the genesis of everything, the beginning of all things. The Changer of Ways, also referred to as Tzeentch, holds several things to be holy. His holy number is 9, his colors are blue and pink, and various versions of those. His holy or revered animals are birds, squids, several other type of undersea creature, and living crystals and impossible geometry. He is a big fan of all of those. Tzeentch also has several alternative titles, the most popular of which is the Changer of Ways, or the Changer of Fates, depending upon which cult you're part of. Now, the Changer of Ways and the Conspirator are both related to, well, Tzeentch's proclivity to mess around with reality and attempt to modify things through unintended or through subtle channels rather than direct intervention. The Changer of Ways, or the Changer of Fates, referring to changing the goals or the ideals of mankind to serve his ends without their knowledge. And of course, the Conspirator is those who work with Tzeentch often see him as their shadowy overboss who is helping them out with their plans just so that their plans can fulfill some part of his own. His other titles are the Great Mutator, and the Great Sorcerer. Above all the other Chaos Gods, Tzeentch is associated with sorcery, warp magic, and warped corruption because of the way that he is. And as a result of that connection with warp corruption, the Great Mutator is a very active term that is used because followers of Tzeentch, sorcerers of Tzeentch, and his many pawns are often gifted mutations, where other gods gift, actual gifts that might be wanted and valued. Tzeentch just gives you a new arm or 17 new eyes and calls it a day. He's great as a boss, believe me. Descriptors and tenets. Well, he has several of them here, and in standard schizophrenic god manner, I have just decided to shout them all out in bird language. Change! He is literally the equivalent of that dude at your improv group who every time you have some decent chemistry going, just shouts out, change! And he is big on that. Every time something is going one way, every time that something is happening to make some actual progress, he shouts change, and everything must dance and change position, direction, or type. The next one is progress. Tzeentch is all about change, and of course, most important part of change is the idea that you are going forward. Naturally, some changes can be negative, but even negative change can hold that hint of possibility, and that hint of possibility feeds into the rest of Tzeentch's doctrine. So, a common theme with Tzeentch is how is he the god of progress if his own schemes keep getting in the way of his previously laid plans? Well, very simple. They're not getting in the way. I'm just playing 400-dimension hypercube chess poker, and you are having to figure out what my actual plan is, even if I don't know what my actual plan is. If the enemy has no idea what we're doing, it is because I don't know what I'm doing. So, the progress is there, whether or not your puny mortal mind can understand it at the moment. The next one is uniqueness. A lot of the things that Tzeentch holds so dear and so important is this idea of non-conformity. Now, with a lot of other gods, we have differences or subtle flavors to their religion or their worship. With Tzeentch, there's so much more variety. He's literally built a ton ton of his religion around uniqueness, individuality, and personal advancement. And as a result of that, your personal journey, your personal rising up in the ranks, that is what you're supposed to value. We're not all on the same team here. We may pretend to be at times, but if there's an opportunity for one or another of us to gain power, not only should we take it, God wants us to take it. It's not like Nurgle, we're not part of the commune, we're not all here to sing Kumbaya around the campfire. No, this is a cutthroat business taking over the world. And if you're not your own man, you're somebody else's. So, the last ones are disproving impossibility and its connection with the concept of hope. Disproving impossibility, or rather just being impossible, is a very common trope with Tzeentch. From the very geometry and physical nature of his realms, from the non-human and non-animalistic form of his demons, all of it is about impossibility. It's about the fact that things don't have to be real for things to be real when you are with Tzeentch. It doesn't have to make sense. Reality can be whatever I goddamn want it to be, as long as Tzeentch is behind me. So, disproving impossibility, you tell me that it's impossible for me to rise in the ranks. I'm going to prove you wrong. How? Worshipping Tzeentch, and he will make the impossible possible for me. And of course, the other side of that is also true. In order to truly believe in this insanely backward logic of, well, everything is progress, yet everything has to change, everyone must be unique, and yet we have to work together, I have to disprove something that isn't possible? What do I have to do in order to keep all of that concept going, in order to keep all those things straight in my head and continue worshipping correctly? Hope. Hope and ambition. These are the two big things that Tzeentch embodies. Now, a lot of people make fun of the concept of hope, and they say that, well, Tzeentch's hope is always a vain hope. It's not necessarily true. The point of the hope is to get you moving, and it is to fuel that greater ambition. Arguably, the ambition and hope aspects of Tzeentch's doctrine are feeding off of one another more than one or another are mutually exclusive. So, where does Tzeentch reside? He resides within the Crystal Labyrinth and the Impossible Palace. Now, the Crystal Labyrinth and the Impossible Palace can best be described as painful to the eyes. It is a constantly shifting maze of crystal walls filled with demons, implanted engrammatic traps and spells, and various other levels of wards and protections that keep the sorcerer god's realm free of any intruders. Not to mention many of his own horrifying creatures and beasts are tasked or punished to remain within the labyrinth and devour anything that attempts to bypass it. His direct foes. Well, really, Tzeentch is at odds with all the other gods. He's willing to work with some of them at times, as he's willing to work with anyone if there's something in it for him, or if it fulfills one of his wonderful plots, but he is never really overt about his hatred for the other gods. He wants to be in charge, but one of the first things that you learn with Tzeentch is he doesn't respect you for going up and shooting the boss in the head, and then declaring yourself the boss. He would much rather you take the long con difficult route of planning through a complicated political mystery or intrigue that may not be necessary. I could just go up and shoot my war boss in the head and then take his position, but that wouldn't be very Tzeentchian of me, now would it? And he wouldn't appreciate it. So, of course, his own strategy has nothing to do with going up and punching Khorne in the face. He's sure that he could, but why be overt when I can simply win without ever trying? And, of course, that is where his part of the great game comes down. The schemes of Tzeentch, the many various plots and schemes and active missions that he has going on at any one time. This is where I come into saying that Tzeentch is just an actual schizophrenic standing upon ultimate power, because those schemes are often actively interfering with one another, and he doesn't really see a problem with it because, of course, change, progress, uniqueness, disproving impossibility. Yeah, so it's fine for you to work against your own allies, but not really, though. Because after the end of the day, Tzeentch is the one in charge. He's the one spinning the wheels of fate, and his schemes are the ones that matter. So, what about his demons? In a universe like that, in a situation where your god is the only one who matters because his schemes are the ones that come to fruition through all of his other schemes working against one another in many cases, what does that make his demons act like? Well, it's a multi-level marketing pyramid scheme. Tzeentch's demons are literally an allegory for an MLM marketing scheme or for an ambition corporation. I almost say that his demons and his human followers work like they're inside of a corporation that buys talent and sells ambition and promises. The MLM pyramid scheme, the idea that there's this, you sell two people and they sell two people and we expand in this way and everyone offers impossible things, gives nothing, and receives the benefits, and this cycle continues on and on and on forever as we get closer and closer to the big man making $1 billion. Well, you can kind of see how a lot of his demons play into that. His minor demons, the pink, blue, and brimstone horrors, are what I call the secretaries and drones. Now, I think that they butcher horrors in a lot of the lore. The original version, the one that I really like, is the idea that they are literally like secretaries and drones. They do menial tasks for Tzeentch. They're kind of dumb, crazy brutes who don't think too hard. They might be scheming or conniving, but they are not hyper-intelligent monsters like a lot of the heralds are, or like his lucky exalted demons. But my favorite thing about the minor demons is that they literally represent the pyramid of power. At the top of the secretary chain, you have the pink horror. A little bit more intelligent, equipped with a melee weapon, usually a knife, has the ability to cast some spells, usually just throwing fire around the place, and he throws warp fire. Warp fire is horribly armor penetrating and does a lot of damage to people. But at the end of the day, the pink horror is not a good melee combatant. He's not an incredible range combatant. He's not a super powerful psyker. He's literally just a drone. His job is to be a frontline foot soldier for an army that otherwise does not have a very heavy unit. And for this reason, he's given a fallback. Literally, there are two people waiting to take his place, not in the wings, but literally inside of him. Once the pink horror is killed, he spawns two blue horrors. Blue horrors are even worse. They usually don't even have a melee weapon, and they are even less intelligent than pink horrors. All that they can do is throw little bit of fire, much like the pink horror could, but worse. However, there are two of them. And then, of course, because this expendable labor force can never have an end, once the blue horror is killed, he splits into two brimstone horrors, which are actually just little motes of fire that go and try and kill people. You can get the idea that this is very much an allegory for a pyramid scheme. You are so expendable that by your death, you will increase the number of workers in the company. It's such a messed up system, but that's literally how his minor demons work. They are intentionally created just to be extra hands that die and become more annoying as they continue dying. Now, you'll notice that Zangors are missing from this entire video, honestly. Zangors and other mutants will come in at a later time, but we'll talk about them. We will talk about Chaos Beastmen and about Demon Beastmen at another time. But they are not demons. They're not included within this, so don't worry about it. We'll get to them later. Next up is the mid-rank, and now you might think with an ambition corporation like Tzeentch's Demonhood, the mid-rank demers would be some sort of management, or maybe normal workers. Nope, the mid-rank demons, flamers, and screamers are literally just brainless tools. They serve one purpose, and that purpose is entirely utilitarian. The flamer is so incredibly brain dead that it is practically unable to think for itself, and in many cases is used like a weapon beast. But even the ones that are relatively intelligent are still just covered in a bunch of empty holes that fire out warp fire. Very dangerous and incredibly deadly, but not exactly the most complicated creature in the universe. Screamers are the same thing. They are literally animalistic intelligence flying discs. May I add, screamers are adorable. I find these guys so darn cute. I think they are just absolutely huggable and so cute. I don't know why. Something about them being like a big stingray, and especially the ones that like don't have eyes, it just looks like a puppy dog. I really want to pet a Screamer of Tzeentch so bad. The big problem with that is that the Screamer of Tzeentch is absolutely frickin' covered in spikes. and they have a very bad temper. I wish that they weren't. I want to be friends with one really badly. But yeah, they are essentially used as tools. The flamers are used to either power spells or store spells within them, and they're also used as weapon beasts. The screamers are literally kidnapped and then either used as basically as skirmish troops, or they are hammered into little demon engines and used as discs of Tzeentch for other demons to ride. Literally a tool, literally a transport thing that's been made out of a demon of Tzeentch. Poor boy, I love them so much. They do not deserve that. And then we get to the exalted demons. Yeah, we're all the way through mid-rank, and we still don't have a demon who's of any actual use to Tzeentch, beyond being a secretary or a tool. The exalted demons come in two flavors. We have Heralds of Tzeentch, who are essentially pink horrors that have actually managed to gain some value in the eyes of Tzeentch, and they are middle management. Genuine middle management. Their job is to oversee others, to follow after the various whims of their overlords, and to ensure that the quota is met, usually by any means necessary. They are capable of some pretty impressive magical feats, and while some of them have various melee weapons, they are mostly designed to cast magical spells and stay away from enemies who can beat them to death, because they're not all that tough. Middle management are rarely all that tough in my experience. All the other exalted ones are the lucky tools. They're essentially exalted XYZs. Now, of course, in an MLM-style friend economy ambition corp, Tzeentch has his favorites, and nepotism can get you pretty far in the demon world, it seems. So those lucky tools, those individual flamers, screamers, or horrors, who are exalted and considered more important for whatever reason, they usually serve a very specific function. For example, you might have a flamer who has a abnormal, again, demonic mutation that allows him to produce a certain type of warp fire that is needed to heat up a forge in order to create certain other creatures. There you go. It becomes an exalted creature. It now won't lose its position in the MLM Corp, and it gets to do its job consistently instead of being dropped back into the bin box to be grabbed when it is needed as chaff or as a weapon beast again. So those lucky tools are kind of like the specialists in the company. You might imagine it as something like an on-call lawyer or an on-demand electrician or something like that that works for your company. That's what the lucky tools are. They get called in when they're needed, and then they are otherwise discarded. A little bit better than the secretaries and drones, who are literally just here to die and get in the way of the enemy and be more annoying every time they die, and significantly more than the completely brainless tools, which are used as literal walking or flying footstools, or as a bellows for a forge. Finally, we get to the only demons that really matter in the eyes of the Changer of Ways. His greater demons. Now again, as per the logic that I went with and that I started with in the Nurgle video, there are usually 9 greater demons of Tzeentch in active use at any one time. However, unlike Nurgle, he has only one major Lord of Change at any one time. This is because Tzeentch is a complete schizo, and he is insanely paranoid about either being overthrown, or about his many plots and plans being interfered with by one of his underlings. And this major greater demon, the exalted greater demon of change, whether it's Kairos or another one of his fellows, is essentially Tzeentch's personal secretary. Their job, in terms of Kairos, his job was to tell Tzeentch the things about the future and past that Tzeentch couldn't figure out for himself. In terms of other greater demons, there have been other things involved. But in addition to that, there are 8 other Lords of Change, the most number of greater demons that exist in the warp. Lucky for us, they aren't all that strong in physical combat, so most of the other greater demons can wipe the floor with a Lord of Change if they get into close range. But what do those 8 minor greater demons do? Well, they act as the equivalent of shady business insiders within the galaxy. They are the BlackRock investors, the George Soroses, and the Silicon Valley know-it-alls to our Tzeentchian Ambition Corp. Essentially, they're working on their own plans, working in their own company, organizing their own cults, and assembling their own demonic legions, and then when they have something particularly really juicy, they kick it back up to the boss or to his personal secretary, and then the boss gets to profit off of it. However, in this case, the boss usually already knows what they're doing, and of course, he's able to track their schemes and add them into his schemes. So, what is Tzeentch's relationship to humanity? What does Tzeentch like about humans? He's such an insane deity who has so many tenets and requirements from us. What does he like? Well, he likes willingness to start again from nothing. This is such a big thing with Tzeentch. The idea of turnover, the idea of transition, the idea that humans could just come back from anything and they'll always be along with the ambition thing, they'll always be along with Tzeentch, it's awesome to him. Because for a god who so constantly has his own plans get in his own way, or the plans of his own followers come to a terrible end at his own hand, he needs followers who are willing to drop everything, lose everything they have, and then come right back the next day and start over again from nothing. It's a huge thing, and that resilience, that natural power of the human spirit to overcome adversity is very important to Tzeentch and to Tzeentchian cults in general. The next one is limitless ambition. Oh my god, that gluttony for power. Power for power's sake. Authority over others in the name of nothing but pure self-aggrandizement. Limitless ambition. Endless ambition. Not a single sip of humble juice in any way. Tzeentch loves that shit because it basically mirrors what he has. It's the idea that I am so good, I am so much better than everyone else, that I inherently know I will be successful, and I will make myself successful. I gotta manifest success, and I will continue to have this limitless ambition until I am successful. And of course, Tzeentch can take that limitless ambition, spin it with that hope paradigm that we talked about before, and run with it until you die. Sometimes you die, sometimes you succeed. It's a gamble. One of the other things that he loves. Thirst for esoteric knowledge is another big one. So whether it's arcane, whether it's historical, whether it's even skill-wise, esoteric knowledge, unique things, secret things, hidden things, taboos, anything covered, Tzeentch wants you to uncover. He loves discovery. He loves genesis of ideas. He loves free market of ideas, change and interaction of things. He is genuinely a psychic and mental chemist. He likes mixing together and multiplying effects over time, and those effectively play into his long-term strategy for success. And then finally, chances and complex plans. If you're a gambler, you're a buddy of Tzeentch. You are going to be friends. Because the same type of mentality that makes a man who has lost $2,000 on craps come back to the table and toss the dice again is the same exact mentality that makes the giant squid creature next to him throw in another $5,000 in order to see if this guy's really crazy enough to bet his house. It's the same thing. They want to push that paradigm. They want to push how far you're willing to put your neck out in order to get glory, because if it's far enough, Tzeentch will approve, and he'll be like, hey, I know you're $5 million in debt to us right now, but bet me your house, and if you win, I'll forgive your debt. And then once you're completely in his debt, well, then you start being useful for things. And hey, if you win, well, that might just give you a taste for it, and then you chase that power high until he has you completely in his web. And part of that web is the complexity of his plans. Tzeentch is all about the long con. He's the master of the long con. The double reversal, the triple betrayal, the super annoying end of the movie thing that changes what everything meant in reality. That's literally Tzeentch's bread and butter. It doesn't even matter if it makes sense. Matter of fact, it's better if it doesn't make sense. It's better if it's convoluted and complex to the point where someone just says, why would you go to that much effort in order to fry a piece of toast? Why did you have to build a giant sunlight that was on the roof that focused all of the light into a mirror that used the mirror to disturb it over a ring in your hand in order to cook your toast when you could have just put it in the goddamn toaster in the first place? And the answer is because Tzeentch, baby. It's gotta be complicated. It's gotta be convoluted. That's the thing that he feeds off of, because unbeknownst to you, some little piece of your long con complicated plan is actually serving him more than you actually succeeding. This is another thing. Tzeentch is very happy to support you for the first half of the con, but once the little ignominious thing that actually helped him is done, he's gonna drop you like yesterday's clothing, and you might be out of luck, quite literally, if the changer of ways abandons you. So, things that Tzeentch hates that humans do, things that he doesn't like about us. Fear. Tzeentch hates fear. Fear stunts progress. Fear stunts hope. It ruins all the things that he uses to drive the engine of his corporation. The other one is dogmatic mentalities. If you have a closed mind, if you're very self-obsessed and not in the way that you can accept new things, if you're not willing to accept help, that's another big one for Tzeentch. If you're not willing to reach out and network with others, and you can't do everything on your own, and so you just close down and shut off and, live in delusions of grandeur, you're of no use to Tzeentch. He has no reason to help people who won't help themselves. And dogmatic mentalities and limited, mental flexibility is going to stunt his ability to use you as a tool. Self-limitations like humility, knowing your limits, thinking that you have limits in the first place, not believing that you can accomplish anything. This is his least favorite type of people who are content and happy and comfortable and not complaining. These people suck. They are not fun, they are not easy to manipulate, they are very, very hard to make them do the things that Tzeentch wants them to do. And thus, he does not like humility. He does not like the idea that, yes, I'm happy with my life and my accomplishments. I have made such progress and I need nothing else. I am content. Well, damn it, you're of no use to me. You've lost that spark that may have been of so much value in the first place, and now he's just going to drop you for the most part. Or maybe he'll force you out of that comfortable position if he thinks he needs you for one of his plots. The other one is mindlessness. Now, people often get this confused with insanity, and it's another thing when we go into the insanity of Khorne, that things are overstated and misunderstood. People often see Psyker of Tzeentch or Demagogue of Tzeentch, spazzing out and schizoing out and freaking out and talking about the sun coming and falling upon them, and they think, oh, he's just completely lost it. He hasn't. Mindlessness, or mindless rage, mindless fury, mindless ambition, blinding ambition, not things that Tzeentch actually likes. You need to be cognizant and conscious for Tzeentch to use you. Now, what often gets confused with insanity is actually inspiration. Now, Tzeentch is one of those gods who hands out psychic or demonic inspiration all the time. Unfortunately, Tzeentch is also a god of change and mutation and magical power, which means that he can sometimes put a little bit too much blessing into his inspiration, which ends up with people spazzing out on the floor, foaming at the mouth, and screaming about the sun eating them and turning into an egg. So, they're not insane, they're just receiving the word of God, and the word of God is scrambling their brains a little bit. They'll be fine. They'll be fine. They'll come back. They'll be alright. But for the moment, maybe put a wooden dowel in their mouth so they don't bite their own tongue off. They'll be back. They'll be back. God's just talking to them right now. So he's not a big fan of mindlessness. He's not a fan of insanity that's permanent, because that'll ruin his effective use of you if you become completely unpredictable. He can predict the future, but if he can't predict you as a person and you become basically useless to him, he's not going to want you to be there anymore. He can accidentally do that to you, but that's a you problem. So, things that Tzeentch will ask you for. It's a process. Like a lot of the corpo stuff with Tzeentch, it's a process. You begin as a pawn. Whether you know it or not, whether you know who you are or not, whether or not you serve chaos, you are a pawn. Everyone is a pawn in Tzeentch's game. Doesn't matter if they're allies or enemy pawns, he can move them all, and he can see them all. You do your job, cog, and perhaps next time you'll be turning the wheel. So you start out as a pawn, you're doing a very simple individual job. Perhaps you work at a company that makes tanks. You work in the industrial fields, and you feel like you can do better with your life. You feel inspired to make progress. And so you do. You do as good as you possibly can at your job, and you make as much progress in your job as you possibly can, inspired by this feeling of ambition that definitely wasn't given to you by chaos. Oh, no, 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 no. Perhaps next time you'll be turning the wheel. What is turning the wheel? Well, turning the wheel means that you actually do get promoted. You get lucky enough and you get capable enough in your job that you get to be in charge of a factory. Well, there you go. There's now people under your authority. You have various abilities as now a person of the middle or lower middle class, and you're turning the wheel. You're making the progress that you sought to see in the world. Be the change that you want to see in the world. Could very easily be the slogan of our corporation of Tzeentch. Turn enough wheels and maybe you'll get to play with the big boys. So, turn enough wheels. What does it mean when Tzeentch says turn enough wheels and you'll get to play with the big boys? Well, it's very simple. If you are successful enough and you continue chasing that high of ambition and hope, and you make enough progress, eventually you will reach a limit. And that limit is usually set by the society you're in. If you started out as a factory worker and you became a factory owner, well, maybe next time you try and marry into the nobility, or you try to get into government or into the rulership of your planet or of your hive, and they're going to stop you. You're a lower class person. You're of no value to the society. Well, that's where the big boys come in, and the big boys in this case are cults of Tzeentch, very often led by these driven or inspired individuals who feel a need to improve society and, of course, to improve their own prospects. Once they reach that point where they've hit a wall and they've run out of wheels to turn, well, they often turn to the person who gave them that inspiration in the first place, and Tzeentch comes down and helps them out with the next big con. How do Tzeentchian cults form? Well, usually groups of the like-minded find something that they all get something out of. Things like insurgencies, where organized groups of people who don't like the local government decide to come together and organize a resistance to them. Organized gangs or cabals, high class or low class, these are all organized criminals. And now, if you started out as someone with genuinely good reasons, a lot of these people start out very, very hardworking, intending for nothing but the best for their planet and their people, wanting to uplift themselves and all of their fellows, that aspiring young fish at the company here to do the right thing at Corpo o Tzeentch. Well, things start getting off the rails after a certain point, but at least they start with a good thing. Everybody gets something out of this. Everyone benefits from our boys club. Everyone benefits from our workers' rights union. Everybody benefits from this various things that we've organized and done. And certainly we haven't done anything terrible yet. Of course, we've put up our big icon of definitely not Tzeentch on the wall, and we've started to organize some prayer sessions to our definitely not fake picture of the Emperor with an icon of Tzeentch hidden on it. But, we're just good guys doing the right thing here. That's often how Tzeentch cults form, and often nobody even knows that they're a cult of Tzeentch. There have been genuine situations where a Lord of Change was possessing one dude of an entire cult, and he organized an entire planetary uprising with not a single person realizing that they were worshipping chaos the whole time. So, yeah, Tzeentch big on the subtlety and the long con over in that direction. But why would you join one of these cults of Tzeentch? Outside of just starting with or forming one as a group of these like-minded, intelligent individuals who have been inspired, why would you join? Do you think life is limiting? Do you feel like your mortal form limits you? Do you fear death? Do you want everything? Do you have so many wants and needs that you feel a constant need to change? Do you want immortality, impossible power, glory in the eyes of others, strength, and the ability to change reality to your whim? Do you want to have all of those things and not actually have to work all that hard for it? Join a cult of Tzeentch. There's always the chance that you succeed, and, well, the big byline to that chance is, do you like gambling? Tzeentch likes gambling with your life, the life of your families. He likes gambling with your future, twisting the skeins of fate to his value and appreciation. So do you like gambling? Do you feel lucky? Well, do you punk. And believe me, a lot of people feel lucky. Quite a few of them would do anything for the power and the change that Tzeentch asks for. One of the most important ones, of course, is immortality. Nobody wants to die, and nobody wants to suffer as they die either. So a lot of people come to Tzeentch because, well, I don't want to die. I don't want to go away, and Tzeentch's gifts very often include immortality. Let's talk about those gifts for just a second. Well, most of the physical gifts are along very similar lines. One of the big ones is many eyes. The many eyes of Tzeentch reflect the many directions and the many backs that you will have to be watching to prevent yourself from getting stabbed in said backs. These many eyes are also representative of the vision and the ability to see that other creatures do not. It is a allegory for sight beyond sight. The next one is multicolors, and of course just changing the colors of your war gear, your skin, your hair, your mutations, or anything else that happens to be around you is a big, big Tzeentch gift. Another big one, of course, in line with his creatures that he loves oh so much, is wings and extra limbs, along with unnatural mutations and fire-linked abilities. So, spells, flames, lightning, things of that nature are normal to begin generating as a gift of Tzeentch, but he's also really big on animalistic mutations. Now, all of the gods have animalistic mutations of some kind, but Tzeentch is the great mutator, and many of his gifts are literally just giving you the head of a lion, or the horns of a stag, or a tentacle for an arm, instead of like a normal gift like making you stronger, or making you immortal, or giving you inspiration. He'll just give you some insane genetic or unnatural mutation, or change some part of you to look like an animal, and there you go. Job's done, and he does this very often, which is why a lot of Tzeentchian cults end up looking quite strange after a certain period of time, because everyone is growing feathers, has digitigrade legs, and has purple eyes in clusters as opposed to normal human eyes. Magic is another big one for Tzeentch's gifts, generating and empowering psychers, providing magic spells or items to his tools and to his favored servants. Now, I have talked about the Chaos Gods generating psychers before, essentially because everyone has a soul, and the psychic gene is just something that empowers that soul. A god can, of course, empower that soul actively to create a conduit between the warp and the individual, and thus creating a psyker artificially. The other thing that Tzeentch loves to do is massively supercharging existing psychers. Someone who was already a psyker who joins a Tzeentchian cult and manages to get some level of recognition within it is very likely to see themselves jump at least one, if not more, levels of power as Tzeentch increases the amount of effectiveness on their soul. Granted, he's also the god with max corruption stats, so there's a danger of warp predation there, but you're already a powerful enough psyker that you have a much easier time protecting yourself. He can also inspire you with ways to protect yourself better. Physical manifestations of corruptions. Well, the biggest ones are the ones that I mentioned before. Tentacles, additional clusters of eyes, feathers, usually pink or blue, changes of skin or hair color, usually to something unnatural, and oftentimes to something animalistic. For example, if you were to have a blessing from Tzeentch that happened to affect your hair, it might not change it into a different color, it might flatten it against your spine and turn it into chitin, and then you have this armored turtle-like, sheath of chitin around the back of your neck and head. And yeah, that's technically protective, but you also look absolutely butt ugly. So, ups and downs. People always talk about, oh, Nurgle corruption, Nurgle gifts, it makes you ugly. Guys, have you seen, the average Tzeentchian cultist? Yeah. Yeah, he gives you random mutations, guys. I don't think that we're going to be calling one or another god particularly ugly with their blessings. Tzeentch literally does whatever the D20 lands on or the D100 lands on. He just gives you wild magic mutations, essentially, which is great. So, corruption of people or animals. The big question here is madness. Is Tzeentch giving you insanity, or is his inspiration simply breaking your simple, human brain? In a lot of cases, it's kind of hard to tell. If the guy is talking in tongues or in prophecy, is he actually insane, or is he gifted? It's hard to tell. You might have to figure it out over a period of time. Test out his predictions and his prophecies, and if he turns out to be right, keep him around. If he turns out to be wrong, he's probably going to die of being insane anyway. The next one is divergent evolution. Now, this is common with animals and with the corruption of the land. Things that shouldn't be happening are happening. A bird suddenly grows teeth. A snake suddenly grows wings. A tree suddenly starts eating people. Divergent evolution. Things that shouldn't be happening start happening, and very often this happens to people, and it isn't always conducive to their continued survival. That's a very important thing I want to pass off. Just because you grow the head of a lion and the tentacle arm of a Flamer of Tzeentch doesn't make it any easier for you to live or eat or fight. Not necessarily. Some of them are downright detrimental to your ability to do any of those. If your arm suddenly loses all of its bones and yet it becomes 10 times stronger, cool. It's still not all that useful without any bones in it, Tzeentch. Thank you a lot. And, of course, because Tzeentch is such a flighty deity and it's so hard to keep track of his attention, he often isn't coming back to fix any of the things that he's broken. So you're kind of just going to have to deal with whatever he gives out to you. And then the next one is inspiration to drive ambition. Now, we already talked about how ambition and hope feed off of each other for Tzeentch, but driving ambition, how does he do that? Inspiration. He gives you prophecies. He breaks your brain open and inserts knowledge into it. He can give you blueprints for weapons, for rituals. He can identify people to you, or he can access your deep memory and implant thoughts and concepts within it that drive you to ever further levels of ambition. Corruption of items. Well, the biggest ones for Tzeentch's items that are corrupted are fire and magic. Generally, the magic is related to things like warp fire or lightning or impossible stuff, but fire is far more common. You can expect any cult to have at least a couple of weapons that are genuinely enchanted to just light on fire. It's a relatively cheap and easy enchantment, and it's not too hard to get lots of people to have it. Very similar to those corrupted, corroded, acidic spewing weapons for Nurgle, Tzeentch just has fire coming out of a lot of his weapons. Or flame weapons that are enhanced in some way with magic to fire warp fire. The next ones are visions and warping influences. Now, the visions, of course, includes that insanity and that enforced inspiration that we talked about before, but the other one is warping influences. The big kicker with this one is psyker powers. He can occasionally gift people who are his genuine followers not the actual soul and capabilities of a psyker, but just the ability to use limited psychic powers. So perhaps he gives you the ability to communicate over a long distance, or, more likely, he gives you the ability to do something like breathe fire. He hasn't changed your physiology to allow you to breathe fire. You just have the ability now, innately, because he's given it to you in a icon, mark, or maybe even just a change to your body that allows you to breathe fire. So, just as planned. Just as planned. Great video, just as planned. Glory to Tzeentch, just as planned. Just as planned. Squidman, just as planned. I hope that this has been a good one for you guys. This was a good double. I was happy to get it done. I was also happy that this one's going to be a lot shorter than the Nurgle one. I realize that an hour and a half is way too long for most people to watch. And that's reasonable. I wouldn't watch it either if it was that long and it wasn't my own. But I hope that this has been helpful for you guys. I hope it's elucidated a bunch of stuff, because Tzeentch is one of those gods that, like, a lot of people, you love him or you hate him, and it's very difficult to find people who really know what the heck he's about. I emphasize certain concepts with him, and I know that that's kind of unique to a lot of different gods that I go into, but I hope that it has been helpful. Remember to comment, go to the votes, and subscribe. Likely going to get the other set of Lugnum videos and possibly even a third adversaries video within the next couple of days, maybe 2 days. I don't know. I'm not going to promise anything. But remember to vote, and then there'll be more votes up when those videos come out. But either way, I wish you a lovely good night.